reflect on the budget speech. Minister, a very good afternoon and thanks for your time as you join us here on Business Watch. How are you?
No, lovely. Thank you very much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Let me start here, Minister. One of the things you did was to reiterate government's mission to grow our economy, improve service delivery and address inequality, which is, of course, something that Eswatini has to get a handle of. I mean, statistics have shown us that unemployment is very, very high, meaning that the inequality gap is wide. What exactly will these mitigating programs be and how will we achieve them?
Thank you so much. No, you're right. So I think we don't need to explain the pro-growth elements to it and service delivery. I think those are self-explanatory. We can get to them. The inequality one is obviously a very difficult one to tackle and to be able to try and deal with. Because obviously, if we do foresee growth, I mean, let's also just to understand clearly, the whole reason why we are pushing so hard for growth is because we have a very big problem on a unemployment front and on a poverty front. And growth is really the only thing that's going to sustainably we can do short-term things around these, but it's the growth that's going to sustainably take us out of these problems as more people get employed, people get better jobs, and that in itself then deals with poverty problems. But if one looks at the inequality issues, one will notice that a lot of our projects, let's call them pro-poor projects, Lucid Phase 2 is purely designed to be able to lift communities and give communities water with all the infrastructure that they need to help to assist them. Mkondo Ngwavuma, large chunk of the budget going towards that. Spot on exactly in there too. These two rural water schemes, the one in Manzini, the other one in Shiselweni, really to bring clean water to the rural areas. It's not the cities we're talking about. It's 100% rural areas. The big power line going, the two are going across the country, totally in the rural areas. Roads in rural areas. Those are very much the pro-poor ones, which we are hoping will be able to fix the inequality issues, which we clearly do have in Eswatini. We recognize them, and we're working quite hard to try and close the gap.
Yeah, and I guess that is another thing that has, given a lot of Emaswati, a lot of optimism, the fact that all of these issues were acknowledged in your budget. But maybe as you acknowledged those, you also rightly acknowledged, when you were presenting this current budget speech, that the previous budget speeches were against a backdrop of growing social unrest and violence. And one might add the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And there's no question about it that all of that stifled our economy. While we start this financial year, we are optimistic and we're praying that there won't be outbreaks of any sort, but we also take a bit of comfort from the announcement you made, Minister, of the Contingency Fund. If you will, please define it in layman's terms, because I'm very excited when I read about it and when I hear you pronouncing about it.
Thank you so much. It is, as you say, it is a first for Eswatini. We do have it mentioned in our constitution, but we just haven't had the resources before to be able to actually do this. And so the contingency fund is really there for an emergency. It's to say, if something comes up, as you touched on, similar to COVID-19 or, the unrest or, something like that hits us as a country, we then have a fund that we can go to. At the moment, what we do is we go for what we call a supplementary budget, which we might still need if we need more money. But the supplementary budget is taking money from somewhere. So everything in the budget we are putting there because we really need the money there. And so the moment you're now taking it means you're saying, well, we were going to do this project. Let us now shut that project down and redirect the funding towards a more critical or more urgent need. And whereas now the contingency fund that we are bringing in means that there's 200 million to deal with any emergency that comes up before we start talking of a supplementary and shutting down some other project that wouldn't be there if it wasn't important. And so this is what it is designed for. And you're spot on. I think it does give us a certain amount of comfort. We hope and pray we won't use it. But it gives us comfort that if we do have an emergency, that there's actually a fund to deal with that emergency specifically.
Very interesting. Let's talk about SOEs. You said in your speech, and I quote, an additional 150 million in Malangeni has been budgeted to increase subventions to state-owned enterprises that are struggling to maintain operations with their current allocations. And indeed, our SOEs have been struggling, Minister, which has even drawn concern from the World Bank. The financial performance of commercial SOEs has been found weak, which makes them a net drain on the budget. What is this government going to reconsider or fix regarding SOEs? Is our legal framework robust enough, or it needs some work? 2, is governance and oversight on SOE strong enough, or it has to be strengthened as well?
You're correct on both of those. And so we are busy with 2 different processes as we speak. So we have got a process which is looking at strengthening our PEU Act. The PEU office is there specifically to give oversight, blow the whistle when something is going wrong, and even have the teeth to deal with issues in SOEs if they come up. We actually got a grant even from the African Development Bank of $150,000 to actually help in doing this actual reform. And the reform is underway as we speak. The second one is the SOE reform. So we also had a SEPAC more than a year ago now, do a whole investigation on what do we need to do. And if you recall the media, it was quite big news when we launched it. It was reducing the SOEs from 49 to about 30. Merging some of them, shutting 1 or 2 down, bringing 1 or 2 back into the parent ministries. But in so doing, we believe those reforms can have a huge stimulus effect. It is designed to deal with a lot of the problem areas that we have in the SOEs. But unfortunately, it is also taking a bit longer than expected. So we have started the process. The first phase 1 is underway as we speak. But we were hoping to be further down the road. Obviously, now that elections are over, we're back in office, we're going to really give it a big push. For instance, next week in Cabinet, it is being presented once again to Cabinet on Tuesday. So there is that big drive to do it. But unfortunately, there are some entities needing extra money just to kind of keep the lights on. And it's pointless, letting them fail, while we are doing the reforms. And so for that reason, yes, we need to put another 150 million emalangeni towards entities that really are in dire straits.
Yeah, no, it's quite an interesting, thing how, SOEs are run, and it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to find that balancing act of, staying efficient and operating within a break-even margin, so to speak. But I also want to touch on, what you proposed in the sense of restructuring key SOEs to create new opportunities for the private sector. There's an even dedicated, part of your speech to the private sector and how they can also accelerate economic growth in partnership with the government. Your budget speech proposes quite a number of ways of strengthening the private sector. How excited should we be in this financial year to see the private sector working hard in accelerating, the growth of our economy?
So number one, just firstly, your discussion just on the SOE front. Some of our SOEs are, let's call it, infringing in private sector space. Owning a Pigspeak hotel, as an example, isn't necessarily what a government, we believe, a government should be doing. And for that reason, let us rather sell it and let the private sector really run that space than have government kind of regulating that space, promoting it, at the same time participating in it. So from that point, we need to try to, as government, reverse out of places where we are stepping over the line when it comes to private sector space and government regulator space. But at the same time, I think one can then just say, what are we doing as government to try to push the private sector? And I can spend hours on this one because it is a very strong focus of ours. Relating to this budget specifically, it was the announcements of the tax reductions, but nothing bigger than actual increased expenditure from government. That really is probably the biggest chunk that is going to be helping the private sector, because there's just so much more money available in the system when government is injecting an extra 3 billion emalangeni into the Eswatini economy in the next 12 months. And so for that reason, we just really hope and pray that the private sector can take full advantage of that. The ease of doing business, as we are just on all the different fronts, trying to make it easier for businesses to run, to be able to keep profits in with a tax reduction and those elements. There's also the government spend, which we know will have a big driving effect.
The education sector as well as the health sector, as per usual, received, we saw an increase in their allocations this year, and there's a lot of excitement to that. But, a lot of money comes with a lot of responsibility. And the reason why there's so much money injected or allocated into these two sectors in particular means there's so much work that has to be done in those two sectors. Talk to me about the increased allocations in these two sectors.
So let me also just correct. I have seen in some media platforms that there's a slight misunderstanding maybe on education. Some are saying there's almost $1 billion increase on education, which is not the case. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 200 and something million actual increase in the Ministry of Education. But what we often don't recognize in the education spend is because the OVC fund sits under the Deputy Prime Minister's office and the Scholarship Fund sits under the Ministry of Labour. And so what I just did in the budget speech, I just brought those in because those are 100% spent to educate eMaSwati. And I brought it all together just to really show the nation that we really spent 5 billion emalangeni in this coming budget on education. But at the same time, it didn't mean that there was $1 billion increase on last year's direct spend. But in the Ministry of Health, there has been a real drive. There's a subcommittee working on it. I'm a member of the subcommittee, just getting a deep understanding of the real need in the Ministry of Health and what we need to do there. So there's been a deep analysis of what we need to try and do to fix the elements in the Ministry of Health and to try and bring in, better controls, as well as elements of, the dialysis, all those different things that one needs to do just to really help eMaSwati to remain healthier and remain alive. And it sounds strange, but it really is the case. And for that reason, we have really injected that additional 250 million. And if you look across the ministries, there was specific focus on health because of the dire need we have there.
And certainly we have seen the many programs that have already started particularly under the Ministry of Health, to try and sort out, the underlying issues and the prevailing issues that continue to confront the Ministry of Health. I think, Minister, ours is done today because of time, unfortunately. But thank you so much. It's going to be Nkwe for growth, as you said. And we do hope that there's going to be a lot of accountability and a lot of progress checking this time around.
Thank you so very much. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Finance Minister Neal Rijkenberg. We were just reflecting on the budget speech that he officially tabled on Monday. We'll go for a net break. We'll return shortly.
Digital helps you make cross-border payments. Human gives you global specialists. Digital allows you to apply for a loan anytime, anywhere. Human connects you to credit experts. Digital puts you in control of your money, while Human connects you to wealth advisors. Digital allows you to freeze, unfreeze, cancel, and reorder your card. Human gives you that personal touch. Digital when you want it. Human when you need it. Get the complete private banking experience with Nedbank Private Clients.